Good day everyone. I am one of the presenter of Lesson 7, Part 1 of the topic Economic Integration and Cooperation. So, what is economic integration? Economic integration is a term used to describe the political and monetary agreements among nations and world regions in which preference is given to member countries. In other words, economic integration is a concept that encompasses various levels of cooperation and coordination between countries to promote economic benefits among member nations. Economic integration is a multifaceted concept that involves various types of agreements and arrangements among countries and regions. It's often driven by the desire to enhance economic cooperation, trade, and overall economic well-being among the participating nations. One key aspect of economic integration is the idea of providing preferences to member countries. This means that countries within an integrated group often give each other special treatment when it comes to trade, investment, or economic policies. These preferences can take different forms. Number 1, trade agreements. Trade agreements such as free trade areas or custom unions are common forms of economic integration. They eliminate or reduce tariffs and trade barriers among member countries, making it easier and cheaper for them to trade with each other. For instance, the European Union's single market is a prime example where member countries enjoy a high degree of trade preference. Second, the monetary integration. Some economic integration arrangements go beyond trade and extend to monetary policies. The Eurozone, where a group of European countries adopted a common currency, the euro, is a significant example of this. Member countries share a common monetary policy and benefit from greater economic coordination. Number 3, political and regulatory cooperation. Economic integration often involves harmonizing regulations and policies. This can range from standards for product, safety, labor laws. The goal is to create a more consistent and efficient business environment within the integrated area. Number 4, customs and border control. Some economic integration arrangements, like custom unions, involve member countries coordinating customs and border control procedures. This reduces delays and costs associated with moving goods across borders. The last number 5, common market. In a common market, not only are trade barriers removed, but there's also a free movement of factors of production, including labor and capital. The European single market, for instance, allows for the free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor. Economic integration can bring several advantages, such as increased trade, economies of scales, and the ability to negotiate as a bloc in international trade. However, it also comes with challenges, including the loss of some national sovereignty, the need for regulatory harmonization, and the potential for unequal distribution of benefits among member countries. As a student, it is essential for us to delve deeper into the specific forms and case studies of economic integration to fully understand the complexities and implications of these agreements. There are three major ways to approach these agreements. Number 1, global integration. Countries from all over the world decide to cooperate through the World Trade Organization. A specific example of a global economic integration is the World Trade Organization. The WTO is a global organization that facilitates international trade by establishing rules and agreements governing the conduct of trade among its member countries. These rules cover areas such as tariffs, trade barriers, intellectual property rights, and dispute settlement mechanisms. Member countries from around the world participate in negotiations and commit to reducing trade barriers, promoting transparency, and fostering a more integrated global economy. When countries decide to cooperate through the World Trade Organization, they are engaging the global economic integration. The WTO serves as a platform to member nations from all corners of the world to negotiate and establish rules for international trade. In summary, global integration through organizations like the WTO allows countries from around the world to cooperate, negotiate trade agreements, and resolve disputes collectively. This promotes international trade and economic growth on a social scale, benefiting member countries and contributing to a more interconnected world economy. Number 2, bilateral integration. Two countries decide to cooperate more closely together, usually in the form of tariff reductions and other trade-related benefits. One specific example of bilateral economic integration is the European Union and the Turkish Customs Union. This agreement, which has been in place since 1996, allows for the free movement of goods between Turkey and the EU member states. It eliminates tariffs and trade barriers for a wide range of products, fostering economic cooperation between these two entities. While Turkey is not an EU member, this arrangement demonstrates how bilateral integration can enhance economic ties between countries or regions. Last one is number 3, regional integration. A group of countries located in the same geographic proximity decided to cooperate, as with the European Union. A specific example of regional economic integration is the North American Free Trade Agreement, or the NAFTA, which has since been replaced by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. These agreements establish a regional trading bloc among the United States, Canada, and Mexico. They reduce trade barriers, eliminate tariffs on many goods, and establish common standards and regulations for trade within North America. This regional integration promoted economic cooperation and created one of the world's largest and most significant trading areas. In summary, trade groups, whether global, bilateral, or regional, are important influence on M&A strategies. M&As are interested in regional trade groups because they tend to be regional as well. World Trade Organization Global Integration GATT, the predecessor to the World Trade Organization in 1947, 23 countries formed GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, under the auspices of the United Nations to abolish quotas and reduce tariffs. By the time the WTO replaced in GATT in 1995, 125 nations has become members. Many believe that GATT's contribution to the trade liberalization enabled the expansion of the world trade in the second half of the 20th century. The fundamental principle of GATT was that each member nation must open its markets equally to every other member nation. This text refers to the principle of trade without discrimination. In the context of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, it means that if a country and its trading partner agree to a lower tariff, that tariff reduction applies to all member countries, even those that didn't initially sign the agreement. This ensures that the benefits are extended equally to all members.
World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, adopted the principles and trade agreements reached under the auspices of GATT, but extended its mission to include trade in services, investment, intellectual property, sanitary measures, plant health, agriculture, textiles, as well as technical barriers to trade. The World Trade Organization, it represents a significant evolution of international trade governance. It builds upon principles and trade agreements established under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT. While broadening its scope, it encompassed a range of critical areas and making them even better. It added new rules for things like services. Think of services like banking or tourism. Protecting ideas and invention, that's intellectual property. Keeping our food safe, which is sanitary measures and plant health. And making sure everyone follows the rules, which is technical barriers to trade. It also looks at how countries invest in each other, which is investment, and how they trade things like cloth, which is textiles, and food, which is agriculture. This diversification of focus reflects on increasing complex nature of global trade in the modern era. In other words, WTO is like a global referee that makes sure international trade is fair and follows the rules. It plays a crucial role or critical role in managing trade relations between countries and promoting a more open and equitable global trading system. The entire membership makes a significant decisions by consensus. However, there are provisions for a majority vote in an event or non-decision by member countries. Agreements then must be ratified by the government of the member nations. So the WTO consists of 159 member countries, collectively accounting for over 97% of the world's trade. Notably, it includes the BRIC countries, BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Showcasing the organization's global reach, decisions within the WTO are typically made by consensus among its member states. However, mechanisms exist for majority voting in situations where consensus cannot be reached. So what is consensus? Consensus refers to a decision-making process where all member countries agree on a particular issue or course of action, and it ensures that decisions are reached collectively and that the interests of all member nations are taken into account. Most Favored Nation or MFN and Dispute Settlement. The WTO continued the MFN Clause of GATT, which implies that member countries should trade without discrimination, basically giving foreign products or national treatment. So Most Favored Nation or MFN essentially means treating all the member countries equally. It implies that if a country grants favorable trading conditions such as low tariffs or trade advantages to one member, it must do the same for all WTO members. This ensures that there is no discrimination in international trade, and foreign products receive similar treatment to domestic products. Although the WTO restricts privilege to office members, some exemptions are allowed as follows. Number 1. Developing countries' manufactured products have been given preferential treatment over those from industrial countries, which means that international trade agreements or trade policies sometimes provide certain advantages or concessions to provide originating from developing nations. This is a way to support the economic growth of developing nations by making it easier for their goods to access global markets. One example of this is the Generalized System of Preferences or GSP program in various countries. The GSP is a trade preference program that grants developing countries, often in sectors like agriculture, textiles, and manufacturing, preferential access to the markets of developed nations. For an instance, the United States, the European Union, and other developed economies have GSP programs that reduce or eliminate tariffs on eligible products from designated developing countries. It provides them with a competitive advantage in international trade. However, they must meet certain criteria and follow rules to qualify for these preferences. So number 2, concessions grant to members within the Regional Trading Alliance, such as EU, have not been extended to countries outside the alliance. So concessions or favorable terms offered within the regional trading alliances like the European Union or EU are typically limited to the members of that alliance. So if EU countries have special trade terms among themselves, countries outside the EU do not automatically benefit from these terms. The European Union or AU trade agreements is a prime example of a regional trading alliance. It has negotiated numerous trade agreements with its member countries and with external nations and regions. When the AU negotiates a trade agreements with a non-member country or region, the concessions and trade benefits it offers are specific to that agreement. So they do not automatically apply to all other countries. For an instance, the EU has a trade agreement with Canada known as Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement or CETA. Under CETA, Canada and the EU grant each other various trade concessions, including tariff reductions and regulatory cooperation. However, these benefits are not extended to all countries, even if they are members of WTO. It is because other countries or regions need to negotiate their own agreements with the AU to receive similar concessions. It reflects the principles of reciprocity in international trade, where each party grants concessions in exchange for concessions received. Number 3. Countries can raise barriers against member countries who feel are trading unfairly. Countries can raise trade barriers against other member countries if they believe the trade is unfair, although exemptions are made during times of war or international tension. Means to take protective measures or impose trade barriers against other member countries if they believe that the trade practices of those countries are unfair or in violation of trade agreements. The ongoing trade tensions between the United States and China provide a pertinent example. Both countries are WTO members, and their trade relationship has been marked by accusations of unfair trade practices. So, in the U.S. perspective, the United States has alleged that China engages in unfair trade practices, including subsidizing industries, manipulating its currency, and engaging in intellectual property theft. In response to these perceived unfair practices, the U.S. has imposed tariffs on a range of Chinese imports. These tariffs are essentially trade barriers designed to make Chinese products more expensive in the U.S. market. So in the Chinese perspectives naman, Chinese in return has raised its own trade barriers against certain U.S. goods in response to the tariffs imposed by the United States. Their retaliatory measures are seen as a response to what China considers unfair trade practices by the U.S. So these actions demonstrate that countries can indeed raise barriers or impose tariffs as a means of protecting their own industries or responding to what they perceived as unfair trade practices by other member countries. However, such actions should ideally be in compliance with WTO rules and agreements, and disputes are often addressed through the WTO dispute settlement mechanism to determine whether the measures taken are consistent with international trade rules. So exemptions are made in times of international tension. Why? Exemptions of these reasons are typically made with intention of addressing immediate and pressing national or international issues. However, it's important to note that trade restrictions and exemptions are subject to international law. and their use is regulated by organizations like the World Trade Organization. Violations of international trade agreements can result in legal disputes and sanctions. One of the WTO that is garnering growing attention is the organization's dispute settlement mechanism, in which countries may bring charges of unfair practices to a WTO panel and accused countries may appeal. So dispute settlement is a mechanism for resolving trade dispute among member countries. It provides a structure and rule-based approach to addressing complex conflicts and disagreements related to international trade. There are time limits on stages of deliberation, and the WTO ruling are binding. If an offending country fails to comply with a panel judgment, trading partners have a right to compensation. If this penalty is ineffective, then the offending country's trading partners have the right to impose countervailing sanctions. However, the effectiveness of the system is under serious debate, given the ambiguity and time-consuming nature of certain cases. So when the member believes that another member is not complying with its trade obligations under the WTO agreement, they can request consultations to try to resolve the issue. So if consultations do not lead to a solution, a panel is established to examine the matter and issue a ruling. The panel's decision can be appealed. Once the ruling is adopted, the member found to be in violation is expected to bring its measures into compliance. If this doesn't happen, the complaining member can request authorization to take measures. For an instance, imagine two countries are arguing about the price of steel. If one is unfairly subsidizing its steel industry, the WTO can step in and make a decision. If the guilty country doesn't change its ways, the other country can impose extra taxes on their products, like a kind of trade punishment. This keeps trade fair and predictable. In addition, the dispute settlement system ensures that the trade conflicts are resolved in a fair and transparent manner, preventing countries from taking unilateral and retaliatory trade actions. So it is a critical component of WTO's efforts to promote a rule-based international trading system.
Agreement. So what does bilateral agreement means? So a bilateral agreement is like a formal deal between two parties, often two countries, where they agree to work together and commit to specific things like trade, defense, or economic cooperation. It's meant to help both parties by strengthening their relationship. Many countries began to shift to bilateral or preferential rather than multilateral free trade agreements. Bilateral trade is much simpler than trying to forge a deal in the WTO. So the reason behind it, why many countries prefer bilateral agreements over multilateral ones, because they can customize the terms to fit their specific needs, negotiate more quickly, and focus on their direct interests. It's like choosing a personalized deal that's easier to manage instead of a one-size-fits-all agreement involving many nations. So the next is the regional economic integration. Regional trade agreements are reciprocal pacts between two or more partners that lie somewhat between bilateral and global integration agreements. So regional economic integration is when countries in a certain area work together to reduce trade barriers and boost their economies. They can do this through agreements like free trade or common markets. This cooperation helps them grow economically. So according to the World Trade Organization, 354 RATs were in the force as of mid-January 2013. So here are some of the best known RTAs. The first one is the European Union. Second is the European Free Trade Association or the EFTA. Then the North American Free Trade Agreement or NAFTA. Then the Southern Common Market or Mercosur. Then the ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and Free Trade Area or AFTA. Then lastly is the Common Markets of Eastern and Southern America or COMESA. So why does geography matters? Neighboring nations tend to ally for similar reasons such as the distance that goods need to travel are short and consumers' tastes are likely to be similar. And distribution channels can be easily be established. So, also, geography matters for a number of reasons in the case of RTAs. So, the first one, neighboring countries often share a common history, language, culture, and currency. Second is close proximity reduces transportation costs, thereby making trade products is cheaper in general. Another strong incentive for geographically close countries to establish an RTA is that trade among bloc members is likely to rise by 330% once an agreement is established. The major reason to establish a regional trade group is to increase the market size. There are two basic types of RTAs from the standpoint of tariff policies. However, many agreements, especially agreements involving the United States, go beyond liberalization of tariffs to include such issues as intellectual property, foreign direct investment, and services. From the standpoint of tariff reduction, the two main types of agreements are the free trade agreements and custom unions. So the free trade agreement or FTA, the goal of an FTA is to abolish all tariffs between member countries. It usually begins modestly by eliminating them on goods that already have low tariffs, and there is usually an implementation period during which all tariffs are eliminated on all products included in the agreement. So the next one is the custom union. In addition to eliminating internal tariffs, member countries levy a common external tariff on goods being imported from non-members in order to establish a custom unions. So a custom union is when countries in a group remove trade barriers among themselves like taxes on imports, but still use the same rules for dealing with other countries outside the group. So the next topic will be reported by Alvin.
The effects of integration. Regional economic integration can affect member countries in social, cultural, political, and economic ways. Initially, however, our focus is on economic rationale. Another effect of integration is the exchange of ideas and knowledge. When people from different cultural backgrounds interact, they bring with them their own perspective and experiences. This can lead to the sharing of ideas and development of new innovation in various fields such as technology, art, and science. Integration also promotes social cohesion and understanding. When people from different cultures interact and get to know each other, stereotypes, and prejudices can be broken down. This lead to the greater sense of empathy and appreciation for different perspectives and experiences. Integration can have economic benefits. When different cultures come together, new market and opportunities can be created. This can lead to increased trade, tourism, and investment, which in turn can stimulate economic growth and development. Static and dynamic effects. Regional economic integration reduces or eliminates those barriers for member countries, producing both static and dynamic effects. Static effects refers to the immediate and direct consequences of a particular event or action, while dynamic effects refers to the long-term and indirect consequences that occurs over time. Here are examples of static and dynamic effects. Static effects. Tax cuts. A static effects of tax cuts is an immediate increase in disposable income for individuals and businesses. This can lead to increased spending, investment, and economic activity in the short term. Dynamic effect. Tax cuts. A dynamic effect of tax cut is the potential for long-term economic growth. Lower taxes can incentive business to invest, innovate, and expand long-term, leading to job creation and increased productivity over time. Static effects are the shifting of resources from inefficient to efficient companies as trade barriers fall. Static effects refers to the immediate and direct consequences or outcomes of a particular event, action, or policy. They are typically observed in the short term and do not take into account any changes or adjustment that may occur over time. Static effects are often easier to measure and analyze as they involve tangible and observable impacts. For example, if the government implement a tax cut, the static effects would be the immediate increase the disposable income for individuals and businesses. This can lead to increased spending, investment, and economic activity in the short term. Similarly, if the company introduces a new product, the static effect would be the initial sales and revenue generated from the product launch. Static effects are important to consider when evaluating the immediate impact and effectiveness of decision or action. Dynamic effects are the overall growth in the market and the impact of the company caused by expanding production and by its ability to achieve greater economic of scale. Dynamic effects refers to the long-term and indirect consequences or outcomes that occurs over time as a result of a particular event, action, or policy. Unlike the static effect, dynamic effects take into account the adjustment, feedback loops, and changes that may occur beyond the immediate impact. Dynamic effects are often more complex and challenging to measure or predict as they involve a range of interrelated factors and variables. These effects can have far-reaching implications and can influence various aspects of society, the economy, and environment. For example, if the government implement a policy to promote renewable energy sources, the dynamic effect for include a development of new technologies, job creation in the renewable energy sectors, resource dependence on fossil fuels, and the decrease of greenhouse gas emission over time. These dynamic effects can contribute a long-term sustainability and a shift toward a greener economy. Static effects may develop when either of two conditions occurs: trade creation and trade diversion. Trade creation, production shift to more efficient producer for reason of comparative advantage, allowing consumer access to more goods or lower prices than would have been possible without integration. Trade creation occurs when an RTE allows member countries to specialize in the production of goods and services in which they have a comparative advantage. This enables them to produce these goods at a lower cost than if they were produced domestically. As a result, member countries can import these goods from each other at a lowest price than they would have to pay if they produce them domestically. Trade creation can lead to increased competition among domestic producers. When member countries can import goods from each other at a lower cost, domestic producers are forced to become more competitive in order to maintain their market share. This can lead to improved efficiency and productivity in domestic economy. Trade creation is an important concept in international trade and regional integration. It can lead to increased economic welfare for member countries by allowing them to benefit from specialization and lower cost import. Trade diversion. Trade shift to countries in the group at the expense of trade with other countries, even though the non-member companies might be more efficient in the absence of trade barriers. Trade diversion. With an RTE is established, member countries often agreement to reduce or eliminate trade barriers, such as tariffs among themselves. This creates a preferential trading bloc, making it more attractive for members countries to trade with each other rather than with non-members. Trade diversion occurs when the reduction in trade barriers within the RTE leads to an increase in trade between members countries, even if not economically efficient. This can happen if the members countries were previously importing goods from non-member countries that were more efficient producers but face higher trade barriers. With the establishment of the RTA, member countries may switch to import from less efficient producer with the agreement because of the preferential treatment they receive. However, trade diversion can also result in economic inefficiencies by diverting trade away from more efficient supplier outside the RTA. It can lead to higher prices and reduce consumer welfare. It can also harm non-member countries that face a decline in export opportunities to the RTA. To mitigate the negative effects of trade diversion, policymakers need to be careful, consider the potential trade-offs, and ensure that the benefits of the RTA outweigh the cost. This can involve negotiating agreements that minimize trade diversion and maximize the overall economic benefits for all parties involved. Economies of scale. Dynamic effects of integration occur when trade barriers come down and market grow. Because of that growth, companies can increase their production, which will result in lower cost per unit, a phenomenon we'll call economies of scale. This could result in more trade between the member countries. Trade creation is increase in investment in the region by local or foreign companies as the market grows. Economies of scale refers to the cost advantage that arise when the production or operation of a business increases in scale. Here are some examples of economies of scale. Number 1, manufacturing. As a company increases its production volume, it can benefit from economies of scale by spreading its fixed costs, such as rent, machinery, and equipment, over a larger output. This can result in a lower average production cost per unit, making the company more competitive in the market. Number 2, purchasing power. Larger companies often have greater purchasing power due to their higher volumes or procurement. This allows them to negotiate better deals with suppliers, obtain bulk discount, and secure lower prices for raw materials and components. The saving from the economies of scale can significantly reduce the overall cost of production. Increased competition. Another important effect of an RTA is greater efficiency due to the increased competition. This could result is investment shifting from less efficient to more efficient companies, or it could result in existing companies become more efficient. Increased competition refers to the situation where there is a higher number of firms or participants competing in a particular market or industry. This can occur due to various factors such as entry of new firms, the removal of barriers to entry, or the expansion of existing firms. When competition increases, it creates a more effective environment where firms strive to gain a competitive edge and attract customers. This can have several effects. Number 1, lower price. Number 2, improve product quality and innovation. Number 3, increase efficiency. Number 4, enhance customer service. Number 5, market expansion and growth. Number 6, market discipline and prevention of monopolistic practices. Increased competition benefits consumer by providing them with more choices, lower prices, and better quality product and services. It also drives firms to become more efficient, innovative, and customer-focused. This creates a dynamic and competitive market environment that promotes economic growth and development.